you, and I know you pray for us, and this is just to say thank you, just to see a little bit. Do want to thank you for that. Thank you. My clicker's not working away down here, you see, so I have to get Cynthia to change it over for me. And maybe for those who don't know about the work of Acre, I know a long time ago, I came and shared about the work here. Way back in 1937, before I was thought about, a couple called William and Margaret McComb. Now, the dates are wrong on that, sorry. But way back in 1937, the couple up here you see in the corner, William and Margaret McComb, left Belfast because God had wonderfully saved them, and God had called William McComb before that to South America to work out there with, in those days it was like Baptist missions. And he worked out there, and he came home and he found himself a wife, like most men do. And also Margaret McComb was called to go to Brazil to share the gospel. And so they set off as a married couple to the land of Brazil, to the Acre state of Brazil. That's where we get our name from. People say, what does Acre mean? Is it an acrostic for whatever, S-C-R-E? And we say, no, it's the state of Brazil that the mission started in, because a way back during the war, they couldn't get funds sent out to the mission. And it wasn't a mission in those days, it was just people out serving the Lord. And the committee of the mission, the few that were on the committee, went into the bank manager in those days, as you did, and asked about getting money transferred out to Brazil. He said, well, what's the name of your mission? And they said, we don't have a name. And he said, okay, where do they work? And they said, Acre in Brazil. Okay, it's going to be Acre Gospel Mission. That's how we got our name. The bank manager named us way back many, many years ago. Anyway, cut a long story short, the McCombs, they went out to Brazil. The little daughter that you saw with them there in the picture, Irene, great sacrifices in those days, because Irene, when they came home on furlough the next time after a few years, Irene had been born, as you see a little girl here. And this picture was taken before they went back to Brazil again without her. It was so dangerous in the Acre where they were going to, the Indian tribes and so on, that they felt it was better to leave her for 2 years at home and then come back after 2 years and be reunited with their daughter. But the war broke out, and they couldn't get back home again. And so they didn't see their daughter for nearly 9 years. She didn't know who they were when they came home. She was living with another family down in the Ards Peninsula who looked after her, who were friends of the McCombs. In those days, whenever you sent a letter, it could be 6 months before you got it. And there was no FaceTime or no WhatsApp or anything, of course, in those days. Phones as well. It was impossible to reach back and forward. And there was great sacrifice. And you know, Irene died just last year. She was away in her 80s. And she never forgave her parents for what they did. She always had a problem with that. She had a younger sister, Eleanor, who's still alive, and a wonderful, wonderful lady. Her and her husband live in Belfast. And they're great friends of ours, and we really thank the Lord for them and for the input. The little photograph in the middle under the Acre sign are some of our older missionaries. Fred Orr, and again, I've told you some of these stories. I'm not getting into them all tonight. Fred Orr, James and Dory Gunning, Victor Maxwell, Hazel Muskimmon, Susan Scott, and there's others there as well, who pioneered the work in those days. And they were difficult days. They didn't have a lot. Sometimes they didn't have very much. And yet God supplied the need for them, and God helped them and used them and blessed them. Tom and Ethel Geddes are also there, and Tom was a doctor here in Belfast, and God called him to be a missionary. Ethel was a nurse, and they got married and they went out to Brazil, and they were just there as missionaries. And then the government asked them, whenever they heard there was a doctor about, they asked them to go to the most remote town in all of Acre, a place called Tarapacá, and asked him to go there as a doctor. And they paid him. And you know, he kept all the missionaries. How God supplied the money for him to be a doctor, but also a missionary to reach out. And they saw a church built. They led so many folk to Christ. An amazing, amazing story. I'll tell you one of the stories. There was a lady who lived in the town of Tarapacá. Now, it's like the Wild West. That's the only way I can describe it. And there was a lady who lived there in the town, and she was the local prostitute. Her daughter came to the church and got wonderfully saved. Young girl got wonderfully saved and invited her mum to come to church. Now you can imagine the talk, can't you? Look who's in. Her name was Maria Español, or Mary of Spain in English. And Maria Español came to the church, and after a number of weeks, she too trusted in Christ. And the men were coming battering at her door to get in. And she was boarding the door up to keep them out, because God transformed her life. You know, she had no money then. What was she going to do? And in the hospital, Tom and Ethel worked there. They built the hospital and worked in the hospital there at the edge of the river. And, Ethel said to Tom, we need somebody to wash the clothes. Let's get Maria Español and bring her here to wash the clothes. And so she came and she was the clothes washer. And then she was promoted to being a cook in the hospital. And she cooked the food in the hospital. Now, you're talking primitive. The boards, you looked out and you saw everything underneath there, the rats and everything underneath running about, underneath the floors and all the rest. It was very primitive, the hospital. And so then they needed a nurse, a nursing auxiliary, and she was promoted to that. And then they needed a nurse, and Ethel said to Tom, Tom, Maria Español would make a great nurse. Tom says, a nurse? Sure, she can't even count. How would she take a pulse? And Ethel said, I'll teach her. And they told us the stories of how that she would take in the pulse. 1, 2, 3. What comes after 3? But Ethel persisted and taught her. It's an amazing story of how that then she was promoted to be a midwife in the hospital. And Tom said to Ethel, she'd make a good wicket keeper anyway, never mind a midwife. But she became a midwife in the hospital. The missionaries eventually moved on, and she retired and she opened her little home. Her home then became a prayer house, believe it or not. A little place where people met to pray and study God's word. And then she opened her home, or part of her home, as a private clinic for anybody that had money could bring their wives or their daughters there to have their babies. And she did it privately for them for quite a number of years. She did that. If I was to take you to Tarawaka with me today, you would see the Maria Español maternity clinic that's built there in her memory. Isn't it wonderful what God can do in a life? How God transforms individuals. And as I said, Tom and Ethel were used mightily of God there to seeing many, many souls come to Christ. And I was in Tarawaka with Tom, and it was like the high sheriff walking about. Everybody was talking to him and calling him, hugging him and all the rest of it. And he said, see that woman there? I delivered her. See that one there? So she has so many children, I delivered 5 of them or whatever. He knew everybody. He was like the sheriff of the town, and it was amazing just to see that, what God has done. Thank you. These are just some of the workers we have. Just a few of them up on the screen, because the work is not only in Brazil, of course, as you know, it's in Portugal and Lanzarote, the Canary Islands as well. And we're thankful for every single one of them. And I could tell you stories about a lot of them tonight that are up here. But in the middle there, you see a man near the Brazilian flag in a green top. And his name is Raimundo Nonato. You need your teeth in to say his name. Raimundo Nonato. And he's our man who works in the market. And I'm going to share a wee bit about him also for a minute or two tonight. Thank you. Again, this is a team of workers in Northern Ireland, as you know, most of us, ourselves and Peter and Jeff and Marianne and Emma, and then Victor and Audrey Maxwell are here at the end. Victor's been the president of the mission for quite a number of years and been involved with Acre for 60 years, serving the Lord with Acre. And he's 84 now. He's stepped down, really, and the burden is over to us as the younger workers in the mission. We do very much value prayer for that and for the responsibilities that we have in the mission now at the moment as well. Thank you. Taking you to Brazil quickly, there's 213.5 million people there. It's a lot of people. We think Northern Ireland is the hub of the universe, don't we, with 1.9 million, and yet the vastness of Brazil is just unbelievable. And our missionaries work over here in the green, over here on the west, in Acre and Amazonas above it, and then 3,500 miles across to the orange bit in the northeast corner, Rio Grande do Norte, and also Paraíba that's there. Thanks. I'm taking you to that northeast corner very quickly, and this is called or it looks like Rio Grande do Norte. It's Rio Grande do Norte, it's pronounced. And this is one of the states that our workers are in today. And we work in quite a number of towns and villages there. There are 71 towns and villages with no gospel witness at all. At all. And so our pastors there are looking out to another town or another village, and apart from having their own church, they're reaching out to other towns and villages with the gospel, which we're thankful for. Thank you. And most of you know we were there in June, and this is Pastor Iran here, as you can see on the left-hand side, and then Peter. The next guy is called Mark Loney. He was born in Brazil. His parents were missionaries with us in Brazil. His mum is still alive, Ira Loney. He's Mark Loney. He works in Portugal in the Algarve with us in the International Evangelical Church of the Algarve. He's the pastor there, and then myself. Thank you. And we flew from Lisbon to the northeast of Brazil to Natal. Just 7.5 hours flight, that one. It was a nice wee one. And got off there with them. James and Dorry Gunning, this older couple here, and you have heard me mention them, I'm sure, in sermons in the church. James and Dorry were retiring, and they came back to Northern Ireland. James was 65, a wee young fella, 65, and the Lord spoke to him and said to him, there's still a work to be done in Brazil. What is you and Dorry coming home for? James and Dorry came to Port Stewart Convention on their honeymoon. I don't think there's too many young ones who come to Port Stewart Convention for their honeymoon now, is there? They'd probably go to Mauritius or somewhere more exotic than Port Stewart. But anyway, they came to Port Stewart Convention for their honeymoon. And God spoke to James at that convention and called him into missionary work. He didn't tell Dorry. He prayed that God would speak to Dorry too. And 2 years later, they belonged to Newton Ards Baptist Church. 2 years later, Dorry Gunning went to the ladies' meeting, and she came home that night and she said to James, I have something to tell you. God has called me to the mission field. God is calling us, James. He said, praise the Lord, Dorry, I've waited 2 years for that to happen. And so the two of them went off to Brazil, to the unknown again in those days, with the McCombs, with Molly Harvey, and served the Lord in very primitive conditions there. As I said, they came home at 65 to retire. God spoke to them. They went back to Brazil for another 6 years. And at 71, James was challenged. They were in Acre and Amazonas over here in the west to go to that northeast corner, a completely new area that they'd never been in before, and to start a work there. One of the men who worked with him was a man called John Marino. And John's family came from the northeast. There was a lot of persecution there. If you were a believer, you were severely persecuted if you came to Christ. You lost your home, you lost your job, you lost your family, you lost everything to follow the Lord. Big persecution. And he asked James and Dorry to come with him. And at 71, James and Dorry packed up their couple of wee suitcases, left all the other things behind that they had accumulated, and off they went to the northeast of Brazil to start a new work there. They didn't even know where they were going to live. Thank you. This little pink house here in the bottom, it probably wasn't pink then, but this little pink house in the bottom was the house that they lived in a place called Campo Redondo. You see the street coming down into Campo Redondo here. And they made their home there. A little lady gave them the keys of her home, and there was a half door on it. And they used to tell us about how the Brazilians used to just put their arms in the door and watch in the door and watch every move that they made. They said we'd wake up after siesta in the afternoon, and there'd be a whole row of them looking through the window at us. But they persisted on with the gospel there. It was difficult. And they reached out to the community there, and they saw people come to Christ, and the little church began to be built up there. Thank you. No, could we go back? Yeah, go back another one, sorry. Go back the other way. Yeah. That's the church today in Campo Redondo. The green curtain at the back, they were taking that away and knocking the wall down behind the pulpit to make the church bigger. Whenever that photograph was taken 4 years ago, and it's a bigger church today that is full of young people. And it's encouraging to see what God has done there over the years. And I remember sitting in the church service that time we were there 4 years ago and thinking if James and Dorry could see this today. We talked about the seed being sown this morning, didn't we? And from those wee seeds that were planted way back 40 years ago, this is the fruit of those seeds today, still going, which we're thankful for. Thank you. Thanks. It's dominated by the Catholicism there, of course, and this is a statue of a saint called Santa Rita, or Saint Rita. She has a thorn sticking out of her head, and they say that it's a thorn from the crown of thorns that Jesus wore. And people actually believe that. We can't understand how somebody could actually believe that. And she was a nun who came from around the Netherlands, and she came over to Brazil, and she did many great things and helped many people in charity and so on. She did many things that were good. But that didn't save her. And they sainted her, and thanks to the next picture, they come on pilgrimages there, as you can see. And you can see all here the thousands and thousands of photographs that they've pinned up underneath the statue. That statue's bigger than the Statue of Liberty in America. It's bigger than the statue of Christ the Redeemer in Rio in the south of Brazil. Huge, huge thing that dominates the whole town of Santa Cruz. And that whole area is dominated by that statue. And people come from all over the world to pay homage to that saint, Saint Rita. And and you can see here there's wax body parts and wooden body parts that they bring. If you have something wrong with your leg or your kidneys or your heart or liver or whatever, you make those things or buy those wax things, and you bring them and you leave them there for her to heal you. It's a statue that has eyes and can't see and ears that can't hear. It has a mouth that can't speak, hands that can't do anything, feet that can't go anywhere. It's a piece of stone. And yet people worship it. Sadly, the God of this world has blinded the eyes of men and women. But we're thankful today, thank you, that God is building his church. And these are just some of our pastors there in the northeast today. We have 18 pastors and their wives and families. And again, that wee seed that was planted away back then. 2 of our pastors and their wives were saved through James and Dory's ministry. Pastor Junior, who's our most senior pastor, he was an alcoholic, and he lived beside James and Dory in Campo Redondo. He was only a wee young fella, but he was an alcoholic. And he used to come home at night, absolutely stone drunk out of his head. 3 o'clock in the morning, put the music on, full pelt, a couple of doors down from James and Dory, and everybody in the street heard the music. But James prayed for him, and James witnessed to him and got down alongside him. And eventually, Junior came to know Christ, and his wife, Christina, and Pastor Iran, who's our field leader there, him and his wife got saved, Socorro. And again, this is the fruit today of the seed that was sown then. And we're so thankful for what God has done. And again, whenever I took that photograph, I was actually very emotional, thinking if James and Dory could see this today and see what the Lord has done. Thank you. You've heard me talk about this church before, probably in a place called Serra do Doctor. And the girls that do the crafts with us, I asked them, had they any money in the account? And they said, what do you want it for? I said, to buy a bit of ground in Brazil. And they looked at me and said, cut yourself on. How can we buy ground in Brazil? We wouldn't have enough money for that. I said, no, it's not Northern Ireland we're buying ground in. It's Brazil. It's £3,000. How much have we got in the account? Exactly £3,000. And the money was transferred to buy that big piece of ground, and there's a bit out here at the front you can't see. I was speaking in the church just 2 weeks after the ground was bought, and I happened to say in the church that it was the pandemic we were talking about. I happened to just say at the end of it, we've just bought a bit of ground in Brazil. We're praying that someday we have a church there. That was it. And a man phoned me on the Sunday afternoon after that, and he said, God really spoke to me the other night. How much is it to build a church in Brazil? I said, well, between 15 and 20,000. He said, what? Is that all? He says, you couldn't build a garage here for that. I said, well, I know that. And he said, look, Keith, I have never met the man. I still don't know him. I've never met him. He said, Keith, I'm going to send you £20,000. He said, because I want to leave a legacy for God. And he sent us the money, and that's the fruit of the church there. We had our pastors' conference there, and I was so thrilled to be there because we had prayed for it and to see it being built. And Iran sent me photographs of every row of blocks, I think, that went on the church, and just to see what God is doing. And thank you. That's the pastor there, Marcelo, and his wife. This is the last conference that's been in it. Amazing to see what God is doing, isn't it? And I hope that that inspires you and encourages you tonight and thrills your heart to see these things as you've been praying for the work as well. Thank you. And of course, Peter's really fussy about food. He'd live in McDonald's. If he had steak in McDonald's, that's all he needs. And all the different foods that they have there and everything else. And we coped with that eventually. Thank you. Opportunities of preaching in many of our churches there. We travelled hundreds and hundreds of miles. Now, we think we have potholes in Northern Ireland. You have no idea. You beat going into them because somebody is coming out of the other one. And it takes you twice as long to go anywhere because the potholes are just, there's no stone over there. And so the roads are just pothole after pothole after pothole. And the cars get wrecked so easily on them because it's so bad, the roads. And yet we travelled hundreds of miles around many of our pastors and many of our churches to be able to share with them. And it was a wonderful opportunity for us. 2 of our pastors live in the state underneath called Paraíba. They travelled 500 kilometres to come up to the conference with the other pastors and spend time with us. And it was just thrilling to see them as well. And I've promised that the next time I'm over, I'm going down to them. So that'll be some of the journey. Thank you. We have a new church in a place called Guanina. You can see it's just on the corner of a street here. The middle picture, there's 2 forms. Do you remember the old forms we used to sit on years ago in the mission halls and all, and your back was broke after about 2 minutes? That's what they're sitting on out there. And they don't complain. 2 hours they sit for, drinking in the Word of God. And just recently, this is a new church plant. There's hundreds of houses around this church. Streets of houses. They had an open air service with about 60 people out there just a couple of weeks ago, over Christmas time really, I suppose, and into the new year, an open air service there. And of course, because of the weather there, you can do that, not like here. We plan an open air, but we'd drowned like tonight, isn't that right? Before you'd even get outside. And this is the pastor, Adriano, and his wife, Maria, who served there. Thank you. We were there, we opened this new church building. This has been on the go for about 4 or 5 years, building this. And because of COVID, it stopped and started and stopped and started. And you can see it's still not finished. There were no doors. There were no windows. They were plastering the outside of it whenever we arrived. It was just mud the whole way up to the front door. No tiles on the floor. If we were building and opening a church in Northern Ireland, everything would have to be perfect, wouldn't it, before we'd open the doors? But not there. They're not interested in those things. All the different old chairs that didn't match and everything else. This was the opening service. And again, what a privilege and opportunity to be there. And they wanted to make sure the church was officially opened whenever we were over. And it was just exciting to see and exciting to hear of what God is doing. And the couple who, the pastors, the couple at the end here on the left, Pastor Abraham and his wife Priscilla, who are serving the Lord in that church. And that is a very, very poor area. And they didn't want to build something elaborate. Not that our churches are, they're very basic out there, but it's more like a barn, as you can see there. They didn't want to build anything elaborate because they didn't want the people around being intimidated by that. Because they want them to come in and hear the gospel. And I know that many are coming and some are trusting the Lord. Thanks. And again, just the fruits. You go to buy a mango here, how much is it, ladies? You'll know that if you eat mangoes, it's expensive, and yet they're falling on the side of the road here, and you could buy them 20 of them for the price you'd pay for one here. And all the different fruits, the coconut milk and all the rest of it we get along the side of the road. And the thing at the end over there, like a root thing, it's called mandioc. And it's like our potatoes here. Wee bit more stringy, but it's their potatoes out there. And they make chips out of that. And they make flour out of it, farina out of it. Lots of different things out of that root vegetable. And it's really, really, really good as well. Thank you. We travelled then from there, we travelled another 2 flights, which was another nearly 7 hours of flying to get to the city of Manaus over in the Amazon. There's 3,500 miles from our workers in Acre to the workers in the northeast. That's how vast the north of Brazil is. And beautiful place, as you can see here, very dangerous city of the Amazon. The rivers are the roadways there. There are no roads, there are roads, around the city, but there's nowhere to go. You can't drive to the south of Brazil or wherever you want to go to. It's right in the heart of the forest, in the heart of the Amazon jungle. And you see the beautiful sunset there. And this is down in a very expensive part of Manaus, the Ponta Negra. And there they've put man-made beaches in along the Amazon River. and lots of people come down there, and there's concerts and all those kinds of things. And then you drive down the road a little bit, and then it's the little wooden shacks that are falling apart, and the dirt and the rubbish lying everywhere, and the rats and everything else. It's such a different, diverse kind of a city, and yet a privilege for us and for our workers to serve the Lord there. Thank you. And that's top photograph just showed some of the workers coming out to the airport to meet us. And this is one of the family that we live with there, the De Souza family. And that's our home that you see here. And quite often we spend time sitting around that table and sharing with them. And Vilma, the lady in the check there, the black check, they own 2 Christian schools, her family, and the schools are actually at this house. She said just a number of years ago, we were talking about China and all that. She said, I would so love a China set. She said, I don't have one. And they're so good to us. They have maids who look after us when we're there. And they do everything for us, cooking, washing, cleaning, everything else. We're not allowed to lift our fingers. We're not allowed to lift a cup off the table. We get told off for that. We do it behind their backs, but we're not allowed to do that. There's a lady there who's been with them for 25 years, Angela, who's an absolute gem. We just love her to bits. And she's part of their family, really, but she does everything, and we're not allowed to do anything. But as I said, we sneak it sometimes. And so we thought, what can we bring them over? Let's bring her a China set, a dinner set. And I like Marketplace and Facebook, the bargains. And I found a brand new one in it, an 8-piece thing with terrines and with everything under the sun. And we brought that over to Brazil in a suitcase, believe it or not, wrapped in bubble wrap. And she was so excited about this, that she'd never had anything like this before. And, to give them something like that really wouldn't mean a lot to us maybe over here was just such a blessing for them because they're so good. Thank you. Our mission family over there, I haven't time to speak about them all tonight, but we have so many workers in schools, and not only the private schools, the Christian schools, but also in the public schools up here. Altina and Jonas and Eliana, sorry, the name's gone. Eliana and her daughter Ariana, and again, so many others that are there that serve the Lord with us in Brazil, and we're thankful. In Manaus, in the city of Manaus. Thank you. The schools that I talked about, the Christian schools, are amazing. eBay schools are called. There's over 600 children come to these schools every day, and they're taught the Word of God. And that's the main thing, because whenever Vilma and Mario's children were growing up into school age, there was no Christian influence in the schools. And they said, we wanted our daughters to go somewhere where they'd hear about the Lord as well. And so they actually started the schools. 26 years ago, they started these schools. From very small beginnings. And to see those schools having grown and what's happening there today. You see them in the middle picture in the bottom there, that they're standing with their hands on their chest, and that's assembly at 7:30 in the morning, where they do allegiance to Brazil, but then they also quote scripture, and they're learning books like Philippians all the way through, and having to quote chunks of that and all the rest of it. Again, just blessing to see that. And many of them come from unsaved backgrounds and unsaved homes, and yet the Word of God, the seed, is being sown in the hearts and lives of these kids as well. And also English classes. We were teaching them English when we were there, and the English classes, because they believe that every child should learn English. We don't do that here, do we? Every child should learn English because they say English is the universal language, and they need that if they want to get on in life, because so many countries in the world speak English. Thank you. The church there, this is our home church there, the Hebron church. They actually just had their anniversary services today. 31 years that church is going. Very humble beginnings. It was started in a carport in a poor area of the city. And Fred Orr started it with our missionaries in a carport. They did children's meetings. They had 2 children the first day. They had 5 children the next time. And the children's work grew. And through the children's work, they reached out to the parents. And it began to work. And then eventually the carport was too small, and there was a house across the road for sale, and they bought the house across the road. And then they built a bit onto it, and they built a bigger veranda onto it, and they built a bigger room onto that, and it became too small. And then they built a church next door to that. They bought the wee piece of ground next door and built a church next door. And it was like an old-fashioned mission hall in Northern Ireland. And, half the wall was dark brown round it. And then the rest was cream on the top of it. And the pillars were brown in it. And they built that church themselves. It became too small. And about 6 years ago, I was there for the closing up of the old church. They built a whole new complex at the side of the old church. And we were there for that final service with Victor Maxwell. Jeff was actually with me, Jeff Ferguson. And then they opened the doors into the new building. Wow, it was just amazing to see that. Modern and so big and to see that full of people. 200 and 300 folk coming along there. Again, that's what God can do. Through the humble beginnings, through the seed that was sown, God has used that. And they have 180-something children registered in their children's club. It's called Awana. And you see all the different colours of uniforms there. And depending on their age, depending on the booklets that they study, and they're studying God's Word every week through that as well, which is great. And they do games and so on, and they kill each other nearly to win. But great opportunities. Thanks. And again, the food there. Thank you. Keep going. I said about Hamundan Nato, the man at the start. Please pray for him. He's 84. He works in the market. He goes to the market. He gets up at 4 in the morning. He goes to the market for 6. He works to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And he shares the gospel. Every home crusade that you will know here. The literature comes from Canallan, where it's printed. It's taken over to Interlink, which is their depot in São Paulo. We get it shipped up there. We pay to get it shipped to him. And that's what he gives out there at the port. Thousands of pieces of literature every week is going out into the hands of people traveling all over the Amazon, all those tributaries of the river. His opportunity of praying with people, sharing the gospel with people, and so on and so on. But he's not very well at the minute. He's been in hospital, and his wife has also been in hospital this last week with dengue fever and have been very, very critically ill. Now, I did hear that he's home from hospital. So please pray for Hamundo Nanato, or his name is Raymond in English. Please pray for him that the Lord will touch him and raise him back up to health and strength again. He's an amazing singer as well, and he just loves to sing and just loves to give thanks to the Lord for his goodness. He's down in the market in Manaus. Thank you. Thank you. There's other churches we speak in. I have talked about this children's club to you before, and this is, thanks, the next picture. Next one. Thank you. This children's club is a very big part of our hearts. There's over 80 kids come here. The couple who you saw briefly there, Cesar and Sulamita, they run that children's ministry. Can you go back that one picture, please? Yeah, this couple here. I maybe mentioned that when I was here in the summertime. We went out. We've been praying about a new leader for our work in Brazil. And the man who leads it, Jose Carlos, and his wife Regis, he had a liver transplant over 20 years ago, has done remarkably well. But because of his health conditions, he cannot travel anymore, really. And so we were praying that God would bring someone along. You need someone with integrity, someone who you can trust, and especially with the finances going out there and things like that. And Cesar is part of this De Souza family that own the schools. Sulamita, his wife, is actually the principal of one of the schools. They're an amazing family. We had them over here 2 years ago nearly, and we had them on the north coast in one of the storms down in Port Ballantrae not Port Ballantrae, Ballantoy Harbour. And we could hardly get the doors of the car open, it was so bad. And the water was coming right down up over the top of the wee cafe at the bottom there. But they were glad to get out in that lovely cool weather. And they're coming from the sauna in Manaus of 40-something degrees humidity as well. And so they were so glad of it. And I was afraid of them getting washed into the sea, for I can't swim. They'd been away. But great family. We were driving down the road, and Cesar, we called in with one of our prayer group leaders. And she was crying, and they were crying. And we talked on the way down the road, and he said, Keith, people are saying to me, what do you want to come to Ireland for? Everybody wants to go to Ireland. What do you want to go to Ireland for? He says, I wanted to come here for one reason, to say thank you to the people here who sent the missionaries to Brazil. Because he said, I wouldn't be here today if Fred Orr hadn't led me to Christ. And he said, I wanted to come here to say thank you. And the tears running down his face. And to cut a very long story short, when we were out there in June, I chatted to him here about coming into the work, and he laughed at me. And we talked about it again out there, and he said, Sulamita and I have been praying. And we said, if it's God's will for us to go into the work of Acre in Brazil, Maya it's called out there, that they will approach us and ask us again. And he said, if they don't ask us, then we'll know it's not the Lord's will. And the conversation came up and we asked them again. And it was amazing how God, over that missionary weekend we were speaking at, God spoke to their hearts again and challenged them and touched their hearts. And today they're in the work with us. Please take this couple on your hearts as they are going to be taking over the work soon in Brazil. They're a great, gifted couple, and we just love them to bits. And they run that children's ministry. Over 80 kids there week by week, hearing the gospel. Parents are coming in now, a very poor, rundown area. Thanks. Keep going. That's just some of them there. We buy Christmas presents for them and send the money out at Christmas. And Cesar and Sulamita don't have any family of their own. And these are all their children. And they just love to go out. Now, I would hate to have to shop for 80 kids. It's bad enough what we have at the house already, but not all these kids. And yet, God has been really blessing them, and they love each one of them. Thank you. Keep going. Thank you. We brought them candy canes a few years ago, and boy, they loved them. Thanks. Keep going, sorry. That's some of their Christmas presents. And the parents as well getting gifts. Thank you. Keep going. You know where this is, very quickly. And we've been asking people, as I said this morning, to pray for Coleraine. Because, as I said earlier, we love this place, and we love you folks, and we're with you in the work here. And we've been asking folk to pray and tell them about the summer outreach here, and about the kids who came in and the doors that were knocked, and the magazines that went out around the doors, and asked people to pray for the work here. And I have to say, Victoria and Lindsay were speaking about the work here and about the summer club in our New Year conference back there a couple of weeks ago, one Saturday morning. And a number of people came and spoke to us afterwards and said about the work here and how they would pray for it. And one particular couple who came to speak to us at a funeral the other day, and he said, I was so blessed and challenged at your conference. He said, I go in and out of church on a Sunday, and I was never blessed as much as I was blessed that day. And he spoke to me about what the girls said, and about the migrants out here, the asylum seekers here out the road. And he said, will you find out if there's any asylum seekers in Lurgan? If there's any of the, I didn't know Lurgan had an hotel, but he said, if there's any hotels in Lurgan that has migrants in them, because I would like to do something to help those people. And we thank the Lord for that. Thank you. Next one. And again, you'll know some of the ones that are here on it, and some of the kids that we had. And, in my car, in the boot of the car, is a load of toys. We hadn't time this weekend or last weekend to go over to the Macro Boy with them. There's still 21 families that are in there. And we've heard some things through Jennifer, who was with us. Pray for Jennifer, because Jennifer just went last Tuesday to be a missionary in Spain for 6 months with Baptist Missions. I don't think she's ever going to come back. And I kept her going. We were at her commissioning service a couple of weeks ago, and I said, you'll probably get a man out there and you'll never come home. But do pray for her. She's going to the south of Spain. She's going to be working with certain people there as well. We can't sort of mention because it's online. Certain people there and opportunities that she will have there. Please pray for her. The Lord will protect her, and the Lord will bless. She's a great girl with great capabilities and abilities and gifts, and I'm sure she'd really value your prayers. And she's keeping in touch with us, so I'll keep you updated as I can about her as well. And as I say, we have toys here. We have other things at home, sweets and things. I'm in Donegal next week, and maybe on Sunday afternoon next week get round to the hotel and leave off the things that we have for them. So please pray that this contact will continue up and be made. Thank you. And that's Jennifer, of course, there. And this will maybe bring horror back to you, never mind memories of the summer. And we've been praying for these families, and again, you know some of the backgrounds and some of the needs and some of the stories that these folk had when they were here. Thank you. For the magazines, thank you. I do pray for our teams as we go out to Fatima. I'll be going out to Portugal, God willing, in May with a team. And then October when the team go out as well to share the gospel there with thousands and tens of thousands of people who come to the shrine. Thanks. And then, of course, you probably all got the magazine last week. There might be a number of them on the table. If you didn't get one, please take one of those with you as well. Now, time is gone tonight. That's just hopefully a bit of encouragement for you. And I want to leave the last couple of thoughts briefly. You'll be here at 10 o'clock. Is that all right? You'll get your supper at 10. Just a couple of thoughts that I want to leave with you tonight as we finish off Psalm 126. I'm just going to read it again because time is over, but I want to read it to you and just leave these thoughts with you tonight. Psalm 126. When the Lord turned again the captivity of Zion, we were like them that dream. Then was our mouth filled with laughter and our tongue with singing. Then said they among the heathen, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us, whereof we are glad. Turn again our captivity, O Lord, as the streams in the south. They that sow in tears shall reap in joy. He that goeth forth and weepeth, bearing precious seed, shall doubtless come again with rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him. We shared this morning about the Soul Winners program, didn't we? He, that's just any of us. Generally, it doesn't have to be anybody super that goes out there to serve the Lord. He that goeth, that we're put out there. He that goeth forth, bearing precious seed. And we shared about how the seed is so important. The seed is the word of God. And how some seed will fall on the stony ground, how some seed will fall on the hard ground, it'll fall among the thorns. But how some seed fell among the good ground and brought forth much fruit. Alan Redpath once said, only a burdened heart can lead to fruitful service. It's not the truth that we know, but the truth that we sow that saves a soul. And the word of God reminds us in Galatians 6:7, whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. Sowing the seed of the word of God is the whole work of the whole church for the whole age, someone said. A man called A.T. Pearson once said, we are not responsible for saving a soul, but we are responsible for sharing the seed. We can't save souls tonight, can we? If we could do that, we'd be out in every street in Coleraine. But we can't save souls. Only God can do that. The farmer goes out and he buys the seed. He prepares the land. He sows the seed. He waters that seed. He fertilizes that seed, but he can't produce the harvest. Only God can produce the harvest. But we still have that responsibility, don't we? And you know, we must do our part because God will do his part. And so often as I think of getting older, Karen's going on to me all the time with this, stop that talking about getting older. She doesn't want to be older because she's older than me, believe it or not. She's 3 weeks older than me. I know she doesn't look it, but anyway, you know, as we get older, sometimes we stop and think, don't we? And the things that were important to us when we were younger, like our cars and our houses and this and that and the other, fade into insignificance sometimes. And we were chatting today about ornaments. And I love little hummels, if you know what they are, the little German things. And I love them. And I've collected them over the years. And there's all these loads of hummels that I have. And I sort of think, our sons will just put them in the first skip that they find. And all these things fade into insignificance, don't they, really? And you think about one day we're going to have to stand before the Lord, whether sooner or later. And we'll have to stand before the Lord and we'll have to give an account of our lives, won't we? And what we've done with our lives. And that scares me sometimes. And we sing that wee song, I wish I'd given him more, isn't that right? And I was speaking in a missionary weekend there back in September time, and a lady came up to me afterwards and she was away in her 70s. Now, I'm not despising that, all right, just in case you hit me on the way out. She was in her 70s, and her husband were missionaries down through the years, and their son died with illness, and they've come through a lot in their lives. And she said to me, Keith, whenever I listen to that tonight, I just wish I was 21 again. Because how I would serve the Lord so much better and so much more with my life. The Soul Winners program, quickly, because time's away and you'll be getting your breakfast. The Soul Winners passion. Verse 5, we read, they that sow in tears, he that goeth forth and weepeth. This introduces the whole idea of passion, doesn't it? And compassion. And a deep concern which we need to have in our hearts as we go forward as a church and as individuals, as we go forward, how we need that renewed compassion in our hearts and burden in our hearts. Someone said that sadly our eyes are dry too often. We don't have the tears and the burden that we used to have. General Booth of the Salvation Army once said that he would like to send all of his candidates, all of those that were coming into the Salvation Army, he'd like to sell all of his officership in the Salvation Army. He said, I'd like to send them all to hell just for 24 hours. He said, if only they could feel the need of the lost and be able to understand the sacrifice involved in winning the lost. I don't think we'd need 24 hours, would we? I think if we had 24 seconds and realized the lostness of souls, how our lives would change, how our burden and our compassion would change. And Booth was invited to Buckingham Palace in 1904 by King Edward VII to be rewarded for his work. And the king said to him, you're doing a good work, a great work. And then he asked him to sign his autograph book. The king did. And Booth wrote these words, Your Majesty, some men's ambition is art. Some men's ambition is fame. Some men's ambition is gold. But my ambition is the souls of men. We haven't time to go into it tonight, but Jesus had passion, didn't he? He had compassion as he saw the lost. The gospel of a broken heart begins with the ministry of a bleeding heart, someone said. As soon as we cease to bleed, we cease to bless. And again, Romans 10 reminds us, how shall they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how shall they believe in him of whom they have not heard? And how will they hear without a preacher? We did a mission, and I maybe mentioned it in the church before, a mission in a little village called West House, just outside Ingleton, where we lived in the Yorkshire Dales and worked with the Faith Mission there. Beautiful little place. And I'll never forget that mission. There were farmers, and I had very liquid hands. I know nothing about farming, although my grandparents and all were farmers, and my uncles are farmers today. I know nothing about farming. But I'll never forget that mission. The farmers couldn't come in because before the meeting at night to pray. And so we met at lunchtime, and we had a big circle of chairs in the little Methodist church hall. And you know, those men, big farmers, as they called out to God to move in that mission and cried out for their families to be saved. Karen will tell you, the tears of those men wet the floor as they sobbed for their loved ones to be saved. And God moved in that mission. And quite a number of young folk, their own young people, came to Christ. And we had an amazing time with those young folk, and still are in touch with many of those young folk even today. The song that we sing sometimes says, give me a heart for others, a longing to win souls for thee. Give me the privilege to tell them of your love on Calvary's tree. Into the highways and byways, I'll be what you want me to be. Give me a heart for others, that I might win them for thee. You know, folks, we have a mission coming up here. I say we. I'm putting myself in there too, but that mission coming up, I know it's over a year away. It seems like forever, doesn't it? It's not going to be that long. That mission with John Weir is the 2 weeks before Easter, April 2025. We need to be praying now for that mission, don't we? We need to be wetting the floor with our tears now for that mission. Because if we sow in tears, I believe we're going to reap in joy. The Soul Winners program and the Soul Winners passion, and finally we see quickly the Soul Winners promise. Wonderful promise to every soul winner who gets on with a job. It says here that they shall reap in joy. That they will doubtless come again with rejoicing, bringing their sheaves with them. And that's the wonderful promise that God is giving us tonight. And you as a church tonight, I believe, that God is giving you that promise to keep on praying and to keep on trusting. And I know sometimes, me especially, can be impatient along the way. Karen will tell you that. Sometimes it's hard to be patient, isn't it? But to keep on believing, because as I said this morning, our God is so big, so strong and so mighty, there's nothing that God cannot do. Family you're praying for tonight, God's able to save them. Do we believe it? Our neighbours that we live beside, God's able to save them. The colleagues that we have, people that we rub shoulders with in the shop, the people in this estate behind us and the estates around about here, hundreds and hundreds of people in houses, thousands of people, God is able to save. But we have to do our part, to sow in tears. And he promises that we will reap in joy. Finney once said, if the church were to live for only 1 week as if they believed the Bible, sinners would melt down before them. The Soul Winners passion, the Soul Winners program, let's hold on to the Soul Winners promise tonight, that we will come rejoicing, bringing in the sheaves. May God bless just these few thoughts, and thank you for your time tonight.